Of all the games I've played over the last 2 years, Enigma may be one of the games that is best symbolized by its own title. Enigma, a person or thing that is mysterious, puzzling, or difficult to understand. And oh boy, the visual novel developed by Enigma and published by Fruit Bat Factory surely fits that definition. At the price of $14.99 on Steam with a 10% launch discount, it's a game that I'm just gonna come out and say, I can do nothing but recommend this game. For those who follow the channel, you know that's something I don't say lightly. The whole point of this channel is to match games to you and your preferences. And for me to make a general statement of recommendation without quantifiers is very, very rare. And here's the thing, I fully well know that this visual novel won't be for everyone. So immediately, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. But part of what makes Enigma so interesting is that it's a visual novel with superb writing and themes, and yet putting my reactions and feelings down into a consumable review format proved to be one of the most difficult experiences I've had on the channel for the last several months. The last thing I want to do with Enigma is spoil the twists and turns that this game has to offer. Hell, I'm still sitting here at the start of this review, going over the ways that this story unveiled itself to me, and sitting here wondering if I have any understanding of what I just experienced. How do I get across that experience to you if I myself am still struggling with it? But that's the funny part about this. That experience that feels so unique compared to other games I've played, that's Enigma's biggest strength. The way that it pulls on your heartstrings, the way that it makes you wonder about this mysterious world that has been handcrafted from the ground up. The way that it makes you question everything that's put in front of you. Enigma's strength comes from its own soul. It's clear that the writers of this game have gone through some unbelievable experiences in their lives, and they've translated that into a novel that grips you from the start and doesn't let go. But okay, I've got to give you something about the story basis, right? Well, of course I do. You follow Chester, a young man who is taken to the seas in search of adventure. Sadly, his adventure runs into a bit of a snag when he gets shipwrecked and washes ashore on a mysterious island. He wakes up in the room of some of the natives in question, and thus he begins his journey of befriending key members of this island and spending what little time he has left with them on this world. Wait, little time? Yes, our main protagonist has a deadly disease referred to as Enigma. Basically, his body is breaking down over time, almost eating at itself. This causes a bit of an interesting dilemma for him, because he wants to make use of the days he has left on this world, enjoying the simple things such as walking through the forest or enjoying the company of others. But at the same time, he worries about connecting with these new strangers because he doesn't want to leave an impression on them that will haunt them for the rest of their days. That dynamic is handled beautifully, as Chester isn't a horribly flawed character, but flawed enough to make him feel human and real. But things aren't exactly what they seem at first, because this island is a little bit special. At the core of it exists a white forest, a forest that apparently eats men who walk into it. So probably not the best tourist destination by any stretch of the imagination. But its name sticks out a bit to Chester. See, the forest's name is Enigma. And thus the game begins to introduce some fantasy elements and gives Chester a bit of reasonable curiosity about how he came to be on this island and what secrets it has to offer. Which leads me to the branching storytelling and the focus of the plot. The way I can best describe the way that Enigma goes about things is that you make a series of choices like you would in any other visual novel. These decisions will lead you down a specific path to a specific ending of the game, of course. So pretty much your standard visual novel experience. However, I will say that in my opinion, this game's branching arcs usually focus on one relationship or interaction between Chester and a character. Because in the end, this game is about the connections that Chester creates and the impact of his character on one specific person and vice versa. Sure, others are involved, but each branch specifically wants to look at one relationship. And that's what threw me off on Enigma at first. See, when you look at the store page, you don't get the impression that this game focuses on relationships. Actually, it makes itself out as a mystery novel, which technically it is, but more on that later. However, I would almost classify it more as a romance novel more than anything else, even if the relationships being formed aren't necessarily romantic in themselves. I know that statement contradicts itself, but hear me out here, because like the title of this game, some things are very difficult to understand at first. What Enigma does better than a lot of the visual novels that I've played is that these relationships feel so strong that you almost immediately assume a love factor into it. They're so strong that they cross over the standard male and female boundary. Not to say that others don't exist, that's just the standard from what I've seen. For example, the first set of endings I got dealt with Chester and Lario. Lario is a young lumberjack that found Chester, who lives with his sister. He doesn't have really any friends other than his family, but the relationship that he creates with Chester is one that feels pure and natural. Chester makes fun of him in a brotherly fashion, and yet you can see a spark develop between the two early on. That spark is so strong that I almost thought that I had miswrote my notes on the game and I was playing a boys' love game. But no, pretty much all the relationships here are on the table, and they work rather well. Every character here has depth to them, and something you really want to learn more about. Lario's sister Colette, for example, is smitten with Chester at first, almost being teenager-like. But after you learn more about her and understand where that's coming from, you really start to care about who she is. You've got Ignis, a mysterious foreigner who doesn't interact with anyone, being almost unapproachable. And yet, seeing Chester attempt to break through his cold outer shell is fascinating. And then there's the herbalist Greta, who obviously is the definition of don't judge a book by her cover. The polarization of her character with childlike tendencies versus sage-like wisdom and how it plays into her nervousness yet curiosity around Chester is just lovely to see. The design of these characters all fit specific parts of the story, but allow for the appropriate amount of depth for each character that the writers seemed fit. None of them feel inserted for the sake of having another character. They all play a critical part of the story, and would be surely missed if taken out. As to the themes of the game, you'd expect the game to comment about the state of life and death given the main protagonist, and of course it does. But frankly, the sheer amount of philosophy and subjects it covers in relation to that is astounding given the plot here. Some may look at Chester at first to be a vessel to send those lessons across, that he's just there to serve the message of the game. But once again, the writer's craftsmanship of ejecting the characters with a realistic element to them, tying you to them without taking you out of the moment, is what makes this plot stand out. You'll sit there and end up lost in thought after playing, or becoming a chatterbox with others just by the sheer life that it can inject into you. You can ask Mermaid Illustration about that one, as I ended up talking her ear off after yet another session of this game. The way this plot ends up segmenting itself in terms of pace really works as well. The game hits you with some serious topics, and it helps that Chester's outlook on life is able to keep that in a relatively non-pitch black type of mood. But then the game will throw you a curveball with a scene that completely comes out of nowhere that'll make you laugh your butt off. Yes, the unexpected underwear scene is a trope in the modern day visual novel. And yet, it works rather well thanks to the setup of Enigma. Oh, and the twists and turns. Now look, I've already told you that the writing is strong, but what's really surprising here is how well it plays with your emotions in multiple ways. Some people may see the idea and the premise of a character who has a deadly disease to be easy for a writer to pull on heartstrings with, and to an extent that is true. But again, to this game's credit, it's so masterful in changing up the formula on how it pulls on things with the different relationships that you won't really care. And I want to just say, there was one particular ending in this game that literally had my jaw on the floor. Look, story-wise, you get good twists, you get bad twists. You get twists that you see coming from a mile away in games, and you get twists that try way too hard. In Enigma, this one particular ending not only surprised the hell out of me, it made me start talking to myself after it happened in sheer shock. But when I went back and actually checked to see if it made sense, it did. Look, I was hesitant to even put this in the review, because that's a spoiler in of itself. But I'm so confident that you will not be able to figure out which ending I was talking about thanks to the great writing in every area of this game, that I had to mention it. It was the KO punch to an experience that already had me floored. And the game does a great job of giving you just enough information about the mysterious elements of the game, giving you even more reason to play through the game, despite the fact that the character relationships are more than enough. Each run spoon feeds you a bit more of the plot, making you want to connect the dots because of the intrigue, but never telling you outright everything you want to know until maybe the very end. And I thank the game for helping me on that. After 2 to 3 endings, the game's will start guiding you in terms of the combinations of the unique endings available if you so choose. In games like this, it's usually done with graying out options that you haven't chosen, but sometimes that doesn't help when it's the unique combination of choices that leads to a new ending. This game comes out and says, hey, do X, do Y, and then Z. I appreciate the help, Enigma. This is a game that you need to complete. Not just one run or 2 branches of the story, because while those branches are good, you need to experience the whole thing. By the time I was done with this game, I had cried about 3 to 4 times, and being the strong and not totally insecure man that I am, that should tell you about the power of this game. I should also mention that the presentation is a nice stylized art style, and that it's really pleasant to look at. I like the characters' designs and the use of color in particular, and the facial expressions really do add a bit to the moment in question, especially if you know what could happen for the future of the character. Now look, it's not unique in any way like the plot was for me, but frankly, beauty is beauty nonetheless, and Enigma satisfies the art portion of it. However, there is no voice acting here, and to be frank on this one, I'm glad that's the case. This type of plot and content can really be tricky to pull off for the level of game it is in the current marketplace. When it comes to death and the emotions that surround it, it can be really hard to pull that off naturally when it comes to voice acting. Not to say that it can't, but in this one case, I feel like the lack of voice acting was the right decision given the plot. Basically, the wrong voice actors with the wrong performances could have really hurt this writing, and considering this writing is some of the best I've seen this year, I don't want anything harming it, so I understand the decision that was made. You've probably noticed that I really don't have a lot of bad to say about this game, and honestly, I don't, with the exception of some technical issues. Now, the game doesn't run poorly, and I would hope not. It is a visual novel. But I do see this bug once in a while, where one of the vertical visual elements of the novel end up staying on the screen regardless of what scene I'm in, making it look off. There's no resolution options either, which does suck. But honestly, that's all I can think of in terms of the bad parts of this game. Everything else is sheer bliss. When it comes down to it, Enigma is exactly the type of game that made me start this channel in the first place. For all the Call of Duties and Halos of the world, a game like Enigma sticks out as a game that has the key ingredients for an overlooked masterpiece. It's a game that oozes soul at every pore, telling a tale that will stick with me for years to come. It's writing that inspires me, making me want to create wondrous tales that will leave an impression for my audience. And in that same breath, I know that the game won't get its due, as it's a smaller novel that won't have the big guys look at it due to not being flashy or having an it factor. But I'm telling you here and now, do not overlook Enigma. Do not overlook a game that I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. I'll be giving 2 copies of the game away for random commenters on this video. Yes, I received a review copy in the first place, but not only would I willingly put down money on any sequel by this developer and publisher in the future, I want to share the experience that I had with the rest of you with a gesture of good faith. I want people to take a chance on this game, because in my opinion, it will deliver you something that you won't expect. I'll be giving it away on Overwatch Monday, so look out for it then. In the meanwhile, I'm just gonna bask in what Enigma did for my own sanity, and my own outlook in life in general. Because frankly, I feel like a better person just having played it. And hopefully, you will too.